The sun was setting over Washington, D.C., casting a golden hue over the city's parks and monuments. In a quiet corner of Lafayette Square, a small film crew was setting up for what appeared to be an unconventional social experiment. The crew was discreet, their cameras hidden in plain sight, blending seamlessly with the surroundings. The star of this experiment, however, was nowhere to be seen yet. A few yards away, a woman sat alone on a park bench. Her appearance was unremarkable, even disheveled. She wore a faded, oversized hoodie, its sleeves frayed at the edges, and a pair of worn-out jeans with patches of dirt. Her hair was tucked under a nondescript beanie, and her face was smudged with what looked like soot or dirt. To anyone passing by, she was just another homeless person seeking a moment of respite in the park. But this was no ordinary woman. This was Melania Trump, former First Lady of the United States, completely unrecognizable under layers of makeup and prosthetics. The concept of the show was simple yet provocative, to explore how society treats those who appear to be on the fringes. Melania had agreed to participate, not for fame or attention, but out of a genuine curiosity about the world beyond the gilded walls of her former life. She wanted to see how people would react to her if they didn't know who she was. Would they show kindness, indifference, or something else entirely? As she sat on the bench, Melania felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a thrill in the anonymity, a freedom she hadn't experienced in years. But there was also a pang of vulnerability. She was no longer protected by the Secret Service or the aura of her former title. For the first time in a long time, she was just another face in the crowd. The cameras rolled as she adjusted her posture, slouching slightly to appear even more inconspicuous. Passers-by glanced at her but quickly looked away, their expressions ranging from pity to discomfort. Melania observed them quietly, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. She wondered what they saw when they looked at her. Did they see a person? Or just a problem to be ignored? The park was alive with the sounds of the city, children laughing, birds chirping, the distant hum of traffic. But for Melania, it felt like a different world. She was used to the polished halls of the White House, the constant buzz of political intrigue, the relentless scrutiny of the media. This was raw, unfiltered reality. And she was determined to experience it fully. As the minutes passed, a police officer patrolling the park noticed her. He was a middle-aged man with a stern expression, his uniform crisp and authoritative. His eyes scanned the area, lingering on Melania for a moment before he approached her. The crew, hidden in the shadows, held their breath. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The officer stopped a few feet away from the bench, his hands resting on his belt. "Ma'am," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "You can't stay here. This area's for public use, and you're causing a disturbance." Melania looked up at him, her eyes wide with feigned confusion. "I'm just sitting here," she replied softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not bothering anyone." The officer sighed, clearly used to dealing with similar situations. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you need help, I can direct you to a shelter or a service that can assist you." Melania hesitated, her mind racing. This was the first test of her experiment, and she wasn't sure how far she wanted to take it. But something in her stirred, a determination to see this through, to understand what it truly meant to walk in someone else's shoes. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice steady now. "I have as much right to be here as anyone else." The officer's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm not going to argue with you. Either you leave voluntarily, or I'll have to escort you out." The tension in the air was palpable. The crew exchanged glances, unsure of how this would play out. Melania took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was no longer just an experiment. It was a confrontation, one that would challenge not only the officer's assumptions but her own as well. And so, the stage was set. The former First Lady, disguised as a homeless woman, sat defiantly on a park bench, facing off against a police officer who had no idea who she really was. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of this unexpected encounter. What would happen next? Only time would tell. The officer's patience was wearing thin. He had dealt with countless individuals in similar situations, people who refused to comply, who argued, who tested his authority. But this woman was different. There was something in her eyes, a quiet defiance that unsettled him. Still, he had a job to do, and he wasn't about to let her disrupt the peace of the park. "Ma'am," he said again, his voice firmer this time. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. You need to leave. Now." Melania remained seated, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been dismissed, ignored, or pushed aside because of how they looked or where they came from. She wasn't going to back down. "I'm not leaving," she repeated, her voice calm but resolute. "This is a public park. I have every right to be here." The officer's jaw tightened. He glanced around, as if hoping someone else would intervene, but the park was relatively empty. The few people nearby were either too absorbed in their own lives or too uncomfortable to get involved. He was on his own. "Listen," he said, stepping closer. "I don't want to make this harder than it has to be. But if you don't come with me willingly, I'll have to escort you out. And trust me, you don't want that." Melania looked up at him, her gaze steady. "I'm not causing any trouble. I'm just sitting here. Why are you doing this?" The officer hesitated for a moment. There was something about her tone, something that made him second-guess himself. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. He had a protocol to follow, and he wasn't about to let her undermine his authority. "Last chance," he said, his voice low. "Are you going to leave on your own, or do I have to make you?" Melania shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere." The officer sighed, clearly frustrated. He reached out and grabbed her by the arm, his grip firm but not overly aggressive. "All right, let's go." Melania stiffened at his touch. She hadn't expected him to actually lay hands on her. For a brief moment, she considered revealing her identity, but she quickly dismissed the idea. This wasn't about her. It was about the experiment, about shedding light on the way people like her, people who appeared homeless or vulnerable, were treated every day. "Let go of me," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You have no right to do this." The officer ignored her protests, pulling her to her feet. "You're causing a disturbance," he said, his tone clipped. "I'm just doing my job." Melania stumbled slightly as he led her away from the bench. She could feel the eyes of the hidden cameras on her, capturing every moment of this humiliating encounter. But she refused to give in. She walked with him, her head held high, even as her heart raced with a mix of anger and fear. As they approached the edge of the park, the officer's grip on her arm tightened. "You're lucky I'm not arresting you," he muttered. "Next time, think twice before you cause trouble." Melania stopped walking, forcing him to stop as well. "I'm not causing trouble," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm just a person. A person who deserves to be treated with respect." The officer rolled his eyes. "Save it for someone who cares," he said, pulling her toward the exit. But Melania wasn't done. She yanked her arm free, surprising both the officer and herself. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not going anywhere until you listen to me." The officer stared at her, clearly taken aback by her sudden defiance. "Lady, you're really pushing it," he said, his tone warning. Melania took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew she was risking everything by standing up to him, but she couldn't back down now. This was her chance to make a statement, to show the world what it was like to be in her shoes, even if only for a moment. "You don't get to treat people like this," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You don't get to decide who belongs and who doesn't. I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." The officer's expression hardened. "All right, that's it," he said, reaching for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest." Melania's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't part of the plan. She hadn't expected things to escalate this far. But before the officer could cuff her, she made a split-second decision. "Wait," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "Do you know who I am?" The officer paused, his hand hovering over his cuffs. "What are you talking about?" Melania reached up and pulled off her beanie, letting her hair fall loose. Then she wiped at her face, removing the layers of dirt and makeup that had disguised her features. The transformation was instantaneous. In an instant, the disheveled homeless woman was gone, replaced by the unmistakable face of Melania Trump. The officer's eyes widened in shock. He took a step back, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find the words. I didn't. I mean. Melania held up a hand, silencing him. "It's okay," she said, her voice softer now. "I understand. You were just doing your job." The officer stared at her, his face pale. "I'm so sorry," he stammered. "I had no idea." Melania shook her head. "You didn't know. But that's the point, isn't it? You didn't see me as a person. You saw me as a problem." The officer looked down, clearly ashamed. I didn't mean to." Melania reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said again. "But I hope this teaches you something. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter how they look or where they come from." The officer nodded, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. I'll remember that," he said quietly. Melania smiled, her heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. She had done what she set out to do. She had shown the world, and herself, what it was like to walk in someone else's shoes. And in the process, she had reminded everyone that kindness and compassion were more important than appearances. As the officer walked away, clearly shaken by the encounter, Melania turned to the hidden cameras and gave a small nod. The experiment was over, but its impact would be felt for a long time to come. And for Melania, it was a reminder that even in the most unexpected moments, there was always an opportunity to make a difference. The officer stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and embarrassment. His hands, which had moments ago been reaching for his handcuffs, now hung limply at his sides. His mouth opened and closed as if he were trying to speak, but no words came out. The weight of what had just happened, and who he had just confronted, was sinking in, and it was overwhelming. I'm so sorry, ma'am," he finally stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea it was you. I was just doing my job." Melania studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. She could see the genuine remorse in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped under the weight of his mistake. She had every right to be angry, to demand an apology, to escalate the situation. But that wasn't why she was here. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about understanding, about shedding light on a larger issue. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice calm and measured. "I understand. You didn't know." The officer shook his head, his face flushed with shame. "No, it's not okay. I should have treated you better. I shouldn't have assumed." Melania held up a hand, cutting him off. "You acted the way you did because of how I looked. And that's the problem, isn't it? You saw someone who didn't fit your idea of who belongs in this park, and you treated me differently because of it." The officer looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't mean to." "I know," Melania said, her tone gentle but firm. "But that's the point. You didn't see me as a person. You saw me as a problem. And that's something we need to change." As she spoke, the hidden cameras continued to roll, capturing every word, every expression. The crew, still concealed from view, watched intently, knowing that this moment would be the heart of the experiment. This was the moment that would make people think, that would spark conversations about empathy, bias, and the way society treats those who are different. The officer glanced around, as if suddenly realizing that they weren't alone. Is this some kind of setup? He asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Melania nodded. It's a social experiment, she explained. I wanted to see how people would treat me if they didn't know who I was. And unfortunately, your reaction is all too common. The officer's face fell. I didn't know, he said again, his voice heavy with regret. Melania reached out and placed a hand on his arm. I know you didn't. And that's why I'm not angry with you. But I hope this experience teaches you something. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter how they look or where they come from. The officer nodded, his eyes downcast. I'll remember that, he said quietly. I promise. Melania smiled, a small but genuine smile. Good. That's all I ask. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the weight of the encounter hanging in the air between them. Then, Melania turned to the hidden cameras and gave a small nod. The crew emerged from their hiding places, their cameras still rolling. The officer's eyes widened as he realized the full extent of what had just happened. This is going to be on TV, he asked, his voice tinged with panic. Melania nodded. Yes. But don't worry. This isn't about shaming you. It's about starting a conversation. It's about making people think about how they treat others. The officer swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of being on camera. But he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded again, his expression resolute. I understand, he said. And I'm sorry. Truly. Melania reached out and shook his hand. Thank you, she said. And I forgive you. The officer's eyes filled with gratitude, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might say more. But instead, he simply nodded and stepped back, allowing the crew to continue filming. As the cameras rolled, Melania turned to address the audience, both the one that would eventually watch this footage and the one that was present in the park. This isn't just about me, she said, her voice strong and clear. It's about all of us. It's about how we treat each other, how we see each other. We need to do better. We need to be better. The crew continued to film as Melania walked away, leaving the officer standing alone in the park. He watched her go, his expression a mix of relief and regret. He knew he had made a mistake, but he also knew that he had been given a second chance, a chance to learn, to grow, to do better. And as the sun set over Washington, D.C., casting a golden glow over the city, Melania couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. This was just the beginning. There was still so much work to be done, so many conversations to be had. But for now, she had taken the first step. And that was enough.